Everyone has thought of going pro in their favorite esport. You dominate your games, hit new peak, and suddenly you wonder, could I be the next Faker, Tens, or Booga? People always say it's hard to go pro. What does that actually mean? How is pushing buttons in a video game harder than becoming a doctor or lawyer? I'm Xpecial, and I played League of Legends professionally for 8 years and coached for 5. Several of my former players are now competing at the top of the LCS. I remember exactly what it was like to dream of going pro. Today, I'm going to break down what it really takes, the common mistakes to avoid, and the biggest lessons I've learned from over a decade in the game. And don't forget, if you're interested in league coaching, DM me the word pro on Discord. Becoming an esports player isn't just hard. It's nearly impossible. While almost anyone could become a lawyer or a doctor with enough time and effort, only a tiny fraction of players will ever go pro in esports. This is a difference between a field that is percentage-based versus flat. In the United States, there are around 1.3 million doctors, which means approximately 0.3% of the population are doctors. Meanwhile, there are 15 million monthly league players in North America and only 50 pros, which equates to 0.0003%. The numbers alone show just how tough it is to reach the pro level, which is why the first requirement to becoming a professional player is a serious love of the game. 17-year-old Xpecial will come home from school, quickly spend 30 minutes on homework max, and play League of Legends until 1 or 2 a.m. before sleeping. He didn't do it because he knew that League of Legends would become the biggest esport in the world in 2 years. He simply enjoyed playing the game and loved the feeling of winning. When he won games, he would get a dose of dopamine and would immediately queue again. When he lost games, he would be pissed at his team and himself and would immediately queue again. What he did was borderline psychotic. There was no huge prize money, no real goal, no actual point to the grind, but he did it anyways. A lot of the earliest pros were normal. They were attending college, maybe had a social life, but the ones that stuck around the longest were definitely not. Call it love for the game or plain addiction. Either way, that's what you need to be in order to reach the top 0.0003%. When people ask me today, would you ever try and play professionally again? I always laugh and tell them, no freaking way. 32-year-old me cannot do what 17-year-old me craved to do. One of the first questions I ask aspiring pros is, what fuels you? I have found that the crazier the answer, the higher the chance that the player will actually make it to the big leagues. Hearing all this, you would think that the grind to get to the pro level is the hardest part, right? But it isn't, which leads to my next point. The game is always changing. Sure, fundamentals stay the same, but the details, those constantly shift. Take a few months off and you'll quickly fall behind. Pro players seem to stay ahead of every meta, every patch, mastering new strategies and champions on the fly. If you're not evolving, you're simply not competing. While coaches often give their opinions of the meta and draft, the players have a much larger part in the discussion than you would expect. Simply put, there is nobody in the world that has more experience on a new patch than the pros playing it every single day. During the 8 years I competed professionally, I can count on one hand the number of 2 or more day breaks I had from the game. As a pro, if you're not learning and improving constantly, chances are you will not see a pro for very long. As you refine your skills, it's natural to focus on what you're good at and further your strengths, right? But that's exactly where many players, including myself, make a big mistake. People often say, stick to one role and just a few champions. But if you want to go pro, that's only half the story. Mastering one role is a start, but the pros attack their weaknesses head on. If you're a one-trick, you're limiting yourself. I main Tristana mid and swapped to Ezreal mid all the way back in Season 1 where I hit rank 1 multiple times. From there, I branched out and started picking up other champions and other roles. By focusing on one role, I was able to climb as high as possible and adjust my game knowledge based on what was working or not working. I was able to take my knowledge to the limits of what that champion allowed, but going from solo queue to pro play requires the next step. Roger Federer, arguably the GOAT of tennis, during a commencement speech said he had a mentality shift that completely changed his game. This occurred when he started to attack not his opponent's weaknesses, but their strengths. In order to improve his play, he went after what his opponents did best so that he could learn to conquer it. This is the exact mentality you need as a pro. If your goal is to be one of the best, you need to never be afraid of a challenge. Instead, seek after it and attack it completely head on. One of my biggest mistakes was shifting my focus to strictly playing support in solo queue. Up until Season 4, I primarily played mid lane in solo queue and only played support in scrims and pro matches. This helped me understand laning, trading, and teamfighting at a higher level than most supports of that time. But eventually, I started only playing support and slowly started losing my edge in all those areas. Instead of focusing on one role, I should have done the opposite and spent time playing jungle, top, and bot to stay ahead of the curve. One of the biggest questions I get to this day is how come hitting rank 1 or challenger doesn't matter anymore? The answer is simply that the goalpost has changed. Too many players have been able to reach challenger or top of the ladder. Is no longer unique or special. If your goal is to go pro, I recommend that you take one role as high as you can and then take one or all the other roles as high as possible. For example, in Valorant, if you're consistently Radiant with Duelists, I recommend getting a second Initiator account to Radiant and then getting a third Smokes account to Radiant. Not only will this allow you to swap roles in pro play, but you will struggle in the beginning as the skills you relied on won't yield the same results and you will pick up skills you never knew existed. I also recommend viewing it as a challenge. So when learning Duelist, for example, instead of picking Reyna and just fragging out, focus on entering with Jet or Raze and pick up an entirely new playstyle and skill set. While I believe being able to compete at a high level in every role will give you a huge advantage today when it comes to being scouted, in a few years, this goalpost will likely change again. I know this is a lot to take in, but before we wrap up, there's one more thing I want to cover. Possibly the toughest lesson of all. When you hear pros saying their post-match interviews, "We're winning, so things are great," what you hear is not joy, it's relief. In esports, all that matters is a scoreboard, victory or defeat. The toughest part, you'll lose a lot. And it's not about whether you fail, it's how you bounce back. And trust me, each time you fall, it gets harder to get back up. Could you imagine if every week you had a public report card that said win or lose? There will be weeks where you could have put in your best effort and still get lose. Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, had this famous quote: "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed." What Jordan doesn't mention here is that in each of those 26 misses, there was a gut-wrenching feeling of the world collapsing. It's what you do in those following moments of immense failure that defines you as a pro. For him, he chose to pick himself back up and do the same thing, but better and more intensely. Things are easy when you're winning. You can do no wrong. Losing in practice just means you're improving or saving strategies for the stage. It's when things are collapsing around you that your mentality is actually tested. For me, I remember the times I broke and I let emotions overwhelm me. It happened season 4 after getting 0-3 by Cloud9 in the finals after going 0-7 against them since they joined LCS. It happened season 4, summer playoffs, after getting reverse swept by LMQ for a world spot after getting removed from TSM. It happened in season 7, summer season, where Phoenix won after a strong 4-2 performance in Rift Rivals against the top 3 European teams. Some people will support you, others will not. But most importantly, you have to still want it. To go through the ups and downs and the grind just for the chance to compete again. Nothing in this video is meant to dissuade you from going pro. In fact, everything I said should provide you with fuel. It may sound crazy, but you have to know that you can beat the odds. And if you're willing to put in the work, that belief can turn into reality. Thanks for watching.